the people that fall into that 20 to 30-year-old category, it feels great to be tapped on the shoulder at a company because you're a player. You're doing a great job, and they continue to tap you on the shoulder and they say, "We can use you over here, and we're going to pay you more money. We're going to relocate you to this great city," and you just keep taking promotions that feel great because you're needed and you're making more money. I challenge people to take it a step further and be more intentional.
Welcome to Climbing the Corporate Ladder Without Breaking a Heel. I am your host, Dr. Cynthia. With over 30 years in the corporate world as a single mom, cancer survivor, and often the only woman in the C-suite, I know the weight high-achieving women carry. Now, as an executive coach and international speaker, I help women reclaim their agency and challenge the norms that hold them back. This show is for ambitious women ready to lead with intention, featuring candid conversations with powerful leaders, sharing the real stories behind their success. If you're ready to look up and step up, you're in the right place. And if you're ready to go a step further, join me on May 7th for my virtual working session, From Drift to Direction. I'll give you the tools and support to stop drifting and start leading with clarity. Reserve your spot today and use code CCL for the special $79 rate. Seats are limited. Details are in the show notes. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of Climbing the Corporate Ladder Without Breaking a Heel. I'm your host and your coach, Dr. Cynthia. You know, if you are the woman who is thinking about how you can expand your influence, moving from excelling within systems and helping get yourself accomplished in systems to growing and helping shape them, this conversation is for you. So many women think the boardroom represents a powerful next, but want to wait till retirement or think that it's some kind of symbolic title that they don't have access to right now. Well, I'm here to tell you that today's guest, who I'm delighted to have, Dr. Keith D. Dorsey, is joining us, and he's going to reframe how you are thinking about your place on boards. He is a former Fortune 500 executive with deep expertise in leadership. He is the founder and CEO of Boardroom Journey, an advisor to CEOs, C-suite leaders, and aspiring board members. He's a thought leader around board readiness, strategic influence, and leadership legacy. And you guys, he is the author of this phenomenal book that you all need to run out and grab. It is The Boardroom Journey, Practical Guidance for Women, the woman listening, to secure a seat at the table. And can I just tell you, I've learned so much. Dr. Keith Dorsey, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Cynthia. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. You know, I always love to start, and especially this is so fascinating to me. And of course, I have some inside baseball because I've been reading your book. But I love to start with the origin story. What prompted you to research this work and move in this space? Especially what I find so fascinating is it's related to women.
It's a great question and an interesting story. You know, late in life, in my third chapter, my what I call my portfolio career, where I do some executive advisory work, I write, I serve on corporate boards and other types of boards, and I decided to go back to school to get my doctorate. And so I went back to school to the University of Southern California, and I registered in their program called the uh, I registered in their program, Organizational Leadership or Organizational Change and Leadership Doctorate Program. And in doing that, I decided that my problem of practice was going to be around shareholder primacy and on corporate boards. And I was really concerned about the fact that more and more companies were focused on short-term issues and gains and not so much the long strategic things. And I really wanted to dive into that research. Well, in my first month of really beginning my research and reading various journals, I found myself one Saturday afternoon, after about 4 hours of research, I was down this rabbit hole researching the lack of gender diversity on corporate
Mm.
boards. And I I smiled and I said, "Keith, are you procrastinating or are you really interested in this topic?" And I giggled and said, "I think I was just procrastinating. I didn't want to focus on my shareholder primacy research." And I ended up down that rabbit hole. I had an assignment that was due on Monday. And so that very next day on Sunday, I dove right back into my research. And 2 hours later, I lift my head up and I was researching the lack of ethnic diversity on corporate boards.
Mhm.
And in doing so, I said, "You know what? I wasn't procrastinating. I really think I'm interested in this." And that following Monday, I went in to USC and I changed my problem of practice from shareholder primacy on corporate boards to the lack of gender and ethnic diversity on corporate boards. And I spent the next 3 years plus really researching uh, what women were doing and people of color were doing to actually get on corporate boards. And I wrote a dissertation that was called, well, basically, I before I even get into the dissertation, I talked to my dissertation chair about this, and I had all of this research. And my dissertation chair said, "Keith, a good dissertation is a done dissertation." And my way too much here to turn it into a dissertation that's going to pass my muster. And so I challenged her and I said, "I really got great themes. This can make an incredible dissertation." She said, "It's way too broad, Key. Narrow it down and trust me, trust the
Yeah.
process." And so I did. And my dissertation title was Corporate Board Diversity, a Path to Boardroom Service by the Wisdom of Black Women Directors. So I
Mm.
really narrowed it
I
down, but I had
love that.
so much more information, especially around women and their path to getting on boards. And I said, "What do I do with all this research and great themes?" She said, "Write a book." So that's where all this came from. It's been a serendipitous journey, Cynthia, where I kind of let go and let God, and here I
Yeah.
am. And I stumbled into something that I'm incredibly passionate about.
Yeah. Well, praise her, right? That your chair had the insight and foresight to suggest that you write a book because it is something that is so needed. It is I love the target focus. I don't feel like there's enough information out there. I mean, you really found the gap in the research when you were looking to do your dissertation topic. And then of course narrowing it down just creates this such a nuance. But expanding it and using that research and that data to write this
Yes.
incredible book is, um, time and research well spent, I would say. You know, one of the things, and I mentioned this in the soft open, that I think about is for a lot of women, I think in particular, I'd be interested if you saw this in your data. Um, think about board positions as something very down the road. Like that's something I'll consider in retirement or as part of my encore career, right? As I like to call it. Is that something that you see that women sort of kick that can down the road? One, and then why is maybe that a flawed approach?
It's a very flawed approach because it's a lengthy process. The National Association of Corporate Directors said that the average person that actually gets on a corporate board, it took them about 5 years of
Mm,
intentionally seeking a corporate board to actually get on a corporate board. That seems to be the average. And so you have many that 2 to 3 months before they retire from their corporate position or government, senior government position, they they think that's the time to begin their board search, or
Mm,
6 months after they've retired and they're now dealing with some identity crisis, and they're starting to question who they are post-retirement. It's at that time that they say, "Maybe I should pay it forward. Maybe I should join a corporate board," and so on and so forth, and that's
right.
really not the best path. Um, and in doing research, and I've had the opportunity to interview hundreds of women that have successfully made this journey, and I found that there are a couple of buckets. You have some that did exactly what I just mentioned, 2 to 3 months prior to retirement or 6 months after retirement, still found a way to actually get on a corporate board. You had others that 2 to 3 years before they retired, they started their process. You have some that from their early 20s
Mm,
knew that they eventually would like to be on a corporate board, largely because of their family lineage. They had family members that had mentors and sponsors and allies, and that was just something they knew to do, and they learned at a very early age that that was something they would like to do. So there are many different paths
sure.
to actually get on corporate boards. Myself, I couldn't even spell board in my 30s. I just lucked out that my corporate career gave me the human capital and exposed me to the social capital that I needed to be exposed to actually get tapped for a corporate board. And that happens to people. What I wanted to do with the book was help people understand at any point of their career the things that they can do to learn about corporate boards and then be best prepared to get on a corporate board. And that's why I created those four protagonists in the book that I wanted to build case studies around at the end of every chapter so that we can take what was being taught in that chapter and show how two to four of these women actually utilize the things that were in the chapter. And those four women, as you know, Cynthia, the first one is a 25-year-old brand new manager in a company. The
Mhm.
second one is a 40-year-old senior manager in a company. The third one is a 55-year-old executive who says she's going to retire in the next 2 to 3 years. And then the fourth one is a 62-year-old CEO of 12 years in a second generation family business who has been an executive director on her own board for the past 12 years, but never an independent director. And so all four women at that point said that at some point they're going to want to serve on a private or public corporate board. Well, what should you be doing at 25 as a new manager,
Right.
40 as a brand new senior manager, 55 as a experienced executive, but will be retiring in the next 2 to 3 years. And then this 62-year-old who said she's ready to turn the business over to her much younger brother. What should they
Right.
be doing? And how should they
Yes.
craft their career? And I wish someone would have sat me down at an early age and say, "These are the things, Keith." Like I said, I got lucky, but I don't
Yeah.
want this to come down to luck anymore. I want people to really be intentional about their path and their journey.
Well, and I spent 30 some years in corporate America, and my first board experience was much like yours, where I sort of got tapped. Volunteer board, right? Non-paid volunteer board for nonprofit is where I started, and I recommend that to a lot of the women I coach. Start with a volunteer board, but be passionate about their purpose, right? Um, and you said you couldn't spell board. I remember the funniest. I don't know how funny it was, but I didn't really understand the word governance.
Yes.
I didn't know what that meant early in my career, and so I remember being in meetings where they would talk about governance and the difference between governance and management, and I would think, what is this governance that they're talking about? I need to go look that up." Um, so you're right. I mean, if you don't have a place where you're able to understand what is the function of the board and what are the roles and responsibilities, which you cover beautifully. One of the things I want to say about the book for the person listening, first of all, is every person listening is covered in one of the protagonists. So, if you're listening to this show, Keith has you covered in this book because you cover the span of anybody that would be listening. The other thing I love is not only is it evidence and research based, it's qualitative and quantitative. So I love the fact that you bring in data and research, but you also have these case studies of and exposure to real people, real stories, and then you not only summarize it, but you have sort of an action plan and takeaways. So it's super practical. So again, I'm kind of bragging on you here, but if for the person listening, if the thought has ever come to your mind of either, gosh, yeah, it seems cool. I'd like to be on a board someday. Or you actively know what it is. Maybe you have attended, as I had in my corporate career, attended meetings of the board of the organization that I was working with. So I saw it from the insider point of view, which can be great experience as well. This book is definitely for you. Before we dig into, and I've got a couple of things specifically related to some of the frameworks and things, but what is what do you find is the thing that holds women back in terms of, pursuing board? I feel like, we're our own worst critic and we've got our own sort of negative self-talk in this space. What came out of your research and talking to these women about their own maybe mental model?
I think you've read studies, you've heard that women are incredibly hard on themselves. Women and people of color are, and they are often thinking, "I just need to do one more thing to be ready."
Mhm,
And so I uncovered in my research that that's been something that will hold them back. I just need to do this last thing, or get this last certification, or go and get this last position. I am not ready as of yet. And there may be some truth to that. There are gaps that, as students of our profession, we need to actually fill in order to add the most value. And there is no finish line, but there is, at some point, as you mentioned, you need to begin to do something in that board role position. And so it may not be your first board might not be that private company board or public board. Oftentimes it is a nonprofit. And I challenge people to, and in the book, to really figure out your why, your purpose, what brings you joy, and then go out there and get experience in a nonprofit board.
mhm,
And then to understand the difference between what we think is synonymous in our society, not for profit and nonprofit. And there really is a difference between the two. Work with a not for profit board when you're really passionate about what they're trying to do in the community. But don't do it with hopes that you're going to gain a lot of human capital experience that's transferable to a corporate board. That may not
mhm.
be the case. A not for profit board is something that's more regionally, a regional endeavor to do something good in that community. And they may have 100 board members. But those board members don't have any fiduciary responsibilities. And when it comes to hiring or firing the executive director or CEO of that not for profit, they don't have committees. They have 100 board members that they charge somewhere between $1,500 and $10,000 to join the board. And then they expect them to bring in the remainder of that
That's right.
via fundraising activities. So to really passionate fundraising individuals with the title of board member. That's heart that's really worthwhile work, but it may not get you the experience you need to go on a corporate board. Conversely, a nonprofit, which is maybe a larger organization, more global or national organization that is ran just like a business, it just happens to take all of their revenue and put it right back into the company towards
Right.
their endeavor. And so you have hospitals, you have many different type of organizations out there that aren't given profits to the individuals, the leaders of the company. And so in those scenarios, that organization may have somewhere between 11 and 25 board members that have fiduciary responsibilities to hire or fire that executive director or CEO. They will have committees, just like the private and public corporations do. And in those scenarios, the human capital that you can transfer to a board um, are relevant.
Yeah.
And the social capital that you develop from those other board members that often are also serving on private and public corporate boards is really remarkable because they get to see you in action. It's not just your title that they're impressed with. They get to see you in an actual board role, and when
Mhm.
they are sitting at their private or public corporate boards and they're asking uh, having a conversation about succession planning and where they're going to find their next board member, they say, you know what? I know Sally. I serve on a nonprofit with Sally. She is phenomenal. I love the way she thinks. I like the questions she asks. And I think she could be great for our private company board here. And
Great
so
point.
you have human capital experience that's transferable from a nonprofit, and you have social capital exposure that gets you noticed as a board member and not just as another executive. So that's the beauty of nonprofit as well.
So, I appreciate you bringing up the distinction, though, between not-for-profit and nonprofit. I'm not sure that I had ever thought about it that way in the past, and I think that, just to harken back on that, um, I was on a board years ago that was like what you initially described. Call it academia. Sometimes are more of the not for profit.
Mhm.
Um, this was not academia, but I was on a board, and and the reason that I ultimately got off the board, having not had that perspective and knowledge that you just shared, is my frustration was there's like 100 people. There's no committees. It was a drive downtown, so I felt like, I spent an hour and 45 minutes in
Yeah.
traffic with difficult parking so I can go to this meeting to be talked at, and it was kinda standing room only. Um, and I didn't feel like I was adding value, nor
Right.
was so I didn't feel like I was contributing in anything except my check, right, toward the fundraising. And I remember when I loved I was passionate about what they were doing, but my time was of value as well. And I'm not saying that that's not a good idea. I think your
Right.
point about choose carefully, and I always am careful now to say, what are the is this a fundraising board? Well, what is the goal of this? I
Mhm.
said, listen, I'll continue to send you my check every year. I don't think I need to have a seat on the board, right? I'm not
Yes.
getting anything, and I don't feel like I'm contributing anything. I'll just send you the check and save myself some time versus I'm on the Able-Lite board, right? A
Mhm.
nonprofit national organization that serves adult individuals with developmental disabilities. Um, and it is much akin to a for-profit organization. It's a balance of mission and margin, but it's small, it's nimble, it's extremely well run, very professional. It's a non-paying board position,
Yes.
but with big responsibility.
Yeah.
I chair one of the committees, and there's steep expectations. To your point, I do feel like I'm learning and gaining and building human capital, which I want to talk about.
Mhm.
And at the same time, perhaps not tomorrow, but at some point, all of those individuals that I am professionally associated with work for big organizations or, various organizations. You never know that they wouldn't tap in the future and say, "Hey, we knew somebody from this other board I'm on and she'd be a great fit." So I think that's an important distinction for the person listening that maybe hasn't had a lot of exposure because I know that not knowing the difference, I fell a
Yeah.
little bit into that trap. Yeah.
Yeah. We often think that they're synonymous,
Yes.
but
Yes.
they really aren't.
And
Yeah.
they're both great. I don't I my example is not to suggest that the first if you are I am currently or was recently I moved, and so that took me out, but I was part of a wonderful not-for-profit organization that it helps serve women in the community, um, that have been incarcerated or had other difficulties in life to re-enter the workforce through a boutique where they're fitted for a week's worth of clothing, et cetera, et cetera. Um, that to me, I was so extremely passionate about it. It's definitely much more in that not-for-profit arena,
Yes,
but I did it because it was something I cared deeply about and
that's
still
it.
care deeply about.
That's it.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Such a good distinction. Talk about capital. Of course, as the author of Human Capital Investment Strategy, I love the fact that you talk about human capital and that we're so aligned in how we think about and define that. You mentioned social capital, and
Yes.
you mentioned human capital. You also talk about um, sort of director capital, you get into cultural capital. Talk about the distinction briefly around those
Yeah.
and sort of the high level definition of what that means.
Well, I appreciate the question because oftentimes, whenever you're talking with someone about a corporate board, you hear about social capital and human capital a lot. But in my research, I uncovered three other capitals that I thought it made sense for us to dive into. And one, as you mentioned, was director capital, which is very similar to human capital because it's really about experience and education and different things like that. But it's more focused around specific boards. So when you begin to think about, okay, you found your why, you found what brought you joy, and then you want to see where you can add the most value. In doing so, you also want to figure out what type of board would I like to be on. And so some people say, I want to be on a board in the oil industry. I want to be with a manufacturing company. So I tell people to begin the research the type of companies that you would like to serve on, not to specifically go be on their board, but to get a bit more intel about what type of experience and what
Mm,
was the journey that their existing board members had. So you can easily do that by going to any website, finding their board, writing down the names of all the board members, and then going on LinkedIn and really researching what type of positions they had and what type of functional expertise are they bringing to the board, and then begin to see where you have gaps compared to them. And then also look at the type of industry boards that you would like to be on and look at their strategies that they have for tomorrow. And where do they have gaps on their board? Where do they have a redundancy of the same talents? And where do they have gaps when you begin to think about where they're trying to go? You know, their gaps can be around AI, cybersecurity, supply chain, human capital talent management, and different things like that. And do you have gaps? Like, if you want to be on that type of board, can you fill the gaps that they have today? And that's where what I call director capital, where you begin to inventory on yourself.
mm,
And what else do I need to do over the next 3, 5, 15 years to be most attractive to a board in that industry that I'm passionate about? That's
mhm,
director. Something else that I uncovered in my research was many people that have made this journey to from executive or senior government official to an actual board member, they had I was shocked that they thought their journey was unique to them.
mm,
But what I uncovered were themes that really existed for all of them. And then I interviewed many women that had exceptional careers, incredible CVs, and they have been trying to get on boards for at least 5 years to no avail. And in that scenario, I found themes as well. Well, one of the themes that I found with those who were getting on boards were they were able to tap into their cultural capital and either innately or intentionally. And this cultural capital forced them to really think about the challenges that they had back in grammar school, back
Mm.
in middle school, high school, their heroes, family members, their favorite aunt, their favorite uncle that they tend to dress like today and model themselves off of, or their father, their mother, the family friends. There were people that impacted them. There were challenges that they figured out how to overcome, obstacles, objections, different things like that. Well, these women who were making their way up the corporate ladder and then eventually on boards were able to tap into their cultural capital
Mm.
and transfer that to their board journey, which is a very difficult journey. And sometimes for good, and sometimes they were able to tap into things that happened to them in their youth that were challenges, and they developed bad habits from
Mm.
and those buttons that our children are able to push and colleagues are able to push to cause bad behavior, they were able to figure out where that came from and how to reverse engineer that and change the way they behave. And so those who were having a problem getting on boards didn't realize some of those bad things that they did where those buttons actually worked. And so uh, there are positive things that you get from out of your cultural
Mhm.
and then the exposure of the negative things that you would get from out of your cultural capital, that when you begin to tap into it, you are able to make good things happen when you're going after this boardroom journey.
Yeah.
Then the fifth capital was another one that separated those who were successful and those who were unsuccessful, and that's around commitment capital. And so you hear a lot about Simon Sinek is great at talking about find your why and the power of
Mhm.
why. And if you have a strong enough why, that might be enough energy to get you through some of the rough patches and ultimately to your goal. And what I uncovered via researchers. Sometimes having that strong enough why still wasn't enough to actually get people over the hump. And commitment capital forces people to really digest where where did they stall? And so when you think about your goal, you reverse engineer your goal and then you execute on the things you need to do to hit your goal. Well, there's something that stopped you from doing whatever you need to do, whether that's not doing the proper trade-offs or, not making the trade-offs you need to make to find the time that you need, the energy that you need, the resources or money that you need, the education that you need, but to really say, "I hit a roadblock here," and why?
Mhm.
And then begin to make the trade-offs or outsource something that you need to get over that next hump. But that's the commitment capital. Really peel it apart and then make the commitment to do the things you need to do differently to get different results. And
Mhm.
those who were getting on boards actually made the commitments. Well, one, uncovered what needed to be done, and then consciously made a decision to do things differently to get past that roadblock and then have many successes, and that creates the momentum you need to ultimately get to the end because as I mentioned before, it could take up to 5 years,
Right.
to be on that journey, and that takes energy, and
Mhm.
so to understand what brings you joy, to understand what your 5 strengths are. I love
That's right.
strength to really focus your energy around something that you are great at. And it doesn't mean out of the 34 characteristics and where your strengths are that 29 through 34 you can't do. You can do it. It just takes much more energy to be able
That's
to
right.
do and uncover where the 5 strengths that you're able to do quite easily and to focus your search around something that's gonna take advantage of those 5 strengths. It's much easier journey when you understand oneself that
Right.
much and then focus your
Absolutely.
energy in the right areas.
Well, and I wanna just come back to something that you said that I think is so important, because it's so actionable. This idea, first of all, we can't emphasize having clarity around your why. I mean, you start out of the gate,
Mhm.
really understand what is your what is your purpose. If it's just to make
Yes.
another stream of income, and
Mm.
that's great.
Yeah,
But it's
it's a great
probably not.
byproduct.
It's a great byproduct, yeah,
Yeah,
because my experience is it's a lot of work. I mean, being on, and again, I'm not on a for-profit paid board seat right now. But by the way, if anybody's listening, I'm available.
yeah,
um, you never know, social capital, right, Keith?
that's
Put it out
right.
there.
If you
Put
don't
your
ask, you don't
aspiration.
get.
That's right. Put your aspirations into the universe, and I have an opening for a, a paid board seat. But having been on some very large national nonprofit boards that, as you mentioned earlier, work at a very high level, consistent with for profit boards. It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
There's a lot expected of you, and as a fiduciary on a board, there's accountability, there's expectations that you have. Um, so you don't go into it just to have something to put on your resume or just to have another income stream. Um, do you think that how critical is it that what the organization does, whether it's a hospital or whatever the organization, and your connection to that thing, it feels like that so directly aligns to the why. If you're just on a board to offer insight because you're really good at math and you're a finance expert, and it could be, they could do widget making, it feels like that creates a disconnect. How critical is it that at the very baseline,
yeah.
that what the company does matters to you in some way, shape, or form?
Great question, Cynthia. I think that's the differentiator. I said something earlier, saying that I like just because you can doesn't mean you should. As executives or senior government officials, we can do a lot of things. We can add value in a lot of places. But when you have two people show up for an interview and both of their CVs, if the interviewer says, I can't go wrong. These are two exceptional individuals. I really can't go wrong. But when it comes to making a decision, it comes down to how that feeling, that gut feeling's there for a reason. Our guts connected. And relationship, trust, and different things like that. These intangibles are part of the hiring process. So
Mm,
these two resumes or bios or CVs are incredible. Their backgrounds incredible. But someone who took the time to reflect on their why, took the time to figure out their secret sauce, took the time to figure out their superpowers, and then directed all their energy into finding a organization where they add the most value because they're aligned with the
yeah,
secret sauce superpowers and their values and their mission. And so everything works versus this other person who can do the job and do it well. When those two individuals interview, the person who's interviewing at a company that's their sweet spot, they're so effervescent. The cadence in their communication, the way that they banter back and forth shows up. And so
right.
you got two people on paper and they say, I can't go wrong. Then they actually end up meeting both of those people. And it's like, it's clearly this person
Yeah,
because of the way, the energy that they espouse, the way they show up and their passion and their questions, their second, third, and fourth level questions. It's like, oh, this person's really into this. I
yeah, they
like that. I
care
want
at a
that person sitting to the left or the right of me.
yeah,
Um, but the other person's qualified.
right.
So there are two schools of thought. Really cast your net very wide and interview with anyone who wants to interview with you, whether you're passionate or not. And people say, Keith, I don't care. Just when I ask them, what are you looking for? I'm looking for a paid board. I don't care if
Mm,
it's private. I don't care if it's public. I don't care what industry. I just want to get paid for my board service. That person may not have enough intestinal fortitude, enough energy to last with a a 2% closing ratio. How many companies will I have to put that person in front of for them to show up properly to actually get selected
Right.
versus the person who's in their sweet spot and they're only interviewing in the areas that will bring them the most joy because life's too short not to. I put them in front of 3 companies and they end up with 2 boards.
Yeah.
Versus the
Yeah.
other person, I put them in front of 20 companies if they have the energy to last that long, and they
Right.
get 1 board if they're lucky. So,
Yes.
um, I just recently put out a post that being an exceptional board member is just table stakes. Most of the or being an exceptional executive is just table stakes.
Mm.
Most of the people you're going to be competing against are exceptional executives. They wanna know how much more value you can bring and whether or not it's something you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, but know that there are 2 different schools of thought. Cast a wide net, I'm more laser focused type
Yes.
of, a school of thought. So it
Yeah.
does
And
make a difference.
for the person listening, especially if you've been listening or following me for any length of time, you also know that I am all about laser beam focus. Our time is precious, and I really want to emphasize this idea of that whole gap analysis. I think is fascinating. I love this context of figure out where you are interested, why you're interested in that. For many of us, it's if, many of the board members on the Able Light board have a loved one who has intellectual developmental disabilities. They have a passion about making that space better. I have a passion around behavioral health, and they're very much connected. So it's work that I don't mind putting in the extra effort and energy because I'm passionate about it. So focusing that, understanding then the skill set. I love this idea of looking, what are they looking for, and what are they and then what are their gaps? Look at their board. Who on their board does what you uniquely potentially could bring to the table, or where do you need to bolster your um the whole thing. Just what resonates with me most is its intentionality and
Yes.
strategy.
Yes.
Nobody oftentimes is knocking on your door. I mean, there are exceptions, of course,
Mhm.
where through your social capital in other ways, you're just invited to participate. But for the vast majority of us, um, it needs to be a very intentional, strategic path, which again, your book outlines so beautifully. Let's move to the protagonist for just a minute.
Yeah.
So, for each of them, because my assumption is that there is a woman listening that fits into each of those categories. What is the first thing or the important thing that you would give in the way of advice for the 20-year-old, the 40-year-old, et cetera, as a starting point?
You know, for that 20-year-old, the people in that fit fall into that 20 to 30-year-old, category. It feels great to be tapped on the shoulder at a company, because you're a player. You're doing a great job, and they continue to tap you on the shoulder, and they say, "We can use you over here, and we're gonna pay you more money. We're gonna relocate you to this great city," and you just keep taking promotions, that feel great because you're needed and you're making more money. I challenge people to take it a step further and be more intentional. Begin with the end in mind. And so it feels wonderful to make more money and to be tapped on the shoulder and to be wanted. But is that ultimately going to get you to you where you ultimately would like to go? And and what I found in talking with people in that category that they may not know where they want to go or where they thought they wanted to go isn't ultimately where they would like to go the more they dive into it. And so if you ultimately at some point want to serve on boards, begin with the end in mind
Mhm.
and then do your research with people that are on those type of boards. What was their career path? They were a salesperson that became a finance person that became a CFO, that became a CEO. That was the journey. Well, is that the would that bring you joy? And
Right.
if that's the case, then be more judicious about the promotions that you're willing to take. Find an ally, find a mentor, find a sponsor that's going to help you get to that next level, and then do it again to help you to get to that next level. But to be, you said it, Cynthia, be more intentional.
Mm.
Intentionality is key here. So I would tell the 20 and 30-year olds that the 40-year-old that got to that senior management position, in my world, my vertical was sales. And I ran very, very large sales teams, one for a Fortune 1000, then for a Fortune 500, and ultimately the executive vice president and global head of sales. I stayed in this category. If I would have picked board service as my ultimate end game, I would never have done that. And
Mm.
so the senior manager, I was a senior manager making great money, well respected in the industry, but it was just in that one silo. I would have gone from being a senior manager and an executive in sales to being move over to a senior management position in operations
Mm.
well, and then became an executive in operations because I would have brought strategic growth expertise and P&L expertise
Yes.
to a board. It worked out. It
Right.
worked out. There's a bit of luck for me.
Yes.
It worked out, but if I was really practicing what I'm preaching today and I can rewind back to that time period, I would have made some different choices as far as that
Mm.
goes. So that's what I would tell that senior manager. You have 15 more years
Yeah.
to actually make some tweaks and maybe move. So if you're a general manager, maybe move from the GM to a senior sales leader role to bring that growth expertise, or to that finance role to bring
Mhm.
that sort of rigor. Because we're beginning or operating with the end in mind. And then the 55-year-old, I would challenge that person who's thinking about retiring in the next 2 to 3 years to join that nonprofit, to do more with their own internal board today. Because a lot of people, when they say you have to have board experience to get the board role, a lot of that board experience can happen within your own
Yes.
company. You mentioned it earlier, Cynthia,
Yes.
attending your own board meetings, presenting to your own board. I interviewed a woman who for 7 years at her Fortune 50 company, presented 6 times a year to that Fortune 50 company board. And when she was ready to get on corporate boards, she landed 3 Fortune 500 public company boards.
Wow.
Never served on a board before, but because she presented to her board for 7 years, 6 times a year,
Mhm.
that was all the board experience that these Fortune 500 companies were interested
Absolutely.
in. And so there are many things you can do in those last 2 to 3 years internally and externally to get additional human and director capital.
Mhm.
And then also start to develop those relationships, that people who can actually say, "I know you, and I like how you think, and I know how you operate, and I'm thinking about you, and I know you're interested in a board." That's oftentimes the best kept secret. People don't share that part,
That's
and
right.
it's important to let
Especially
anyone and
women.
everyone. No, they really don't, and the goal here is to let anyone and everyone know that you're interested in serving on boards at this stage, whether that's private or public or nonprofit or not-for-profit. Let people
Mhm.
know. And then lastly, that person who's in their 60s, some think it's too late at that particular point. But no, really to do the inventory on what value you're gonna bring, and if you are an executive director on a board, but you've never been a non-executive or independent director, to begin to go to those mixers with, women corporate directors, 50-50 women on boards, and, you name it, National Association of Corporate Directors or Private Directors Association. There are hundreds. But to begin to mingle so that people know you're interested in taking that incredible executive director experience and moving it over to an independent director or non-executive director role.
Such sage advice, and I'm convinced that there's no way that every woman or person listening didn't have some incredible takeaway. I would say regardless of your age, pick up a copy of Dr. Keith Dorsey's book, The Boardroom Journey: Practical Guide for Women to Secure a Seat at the Table, because it is so rich. I'm about 3/4 of the way through it, Keith, and I have underlined and dog-eared and flagged and learned a lot. I'm in that third category, and I'm still and have done a lot of work both on boards and being inside great organizations and responsible for that. And I think that there's the takeaway for all of us because we don't spend a lot of time. There aren't a lot of classes or places where you have this access to this kind of rich information, and you've sort of collected it all for us in one place. The time has gone by so fast, as it always does. I love to always conclude with a question for my guest, and that is, and it's a bit of a generalized question, but what is the one thing you would invite the listener to start doing, stop doing, and continue doing?
Wow. Start letting everyone and anyone and everyone know you're interested in the board. And in today's society, one of the first questions that someone would ask you upon meeting you on the train, a plane, at a round table, buffet dinner, they will say, "What do you do?" And we go into this 23-second introduction of what we do, and it's very like this and very
Yeah.
vocational. I challenge people to add 7 to 11 more seconds to their autopilot description of what they do that's more, singularly focused around our vocation and say, "And I serve on this nonprofit board and that nonprofit board, and I'm in the process of looking for a private company manufacturing, organization where they probably make less than $100 million a year, but they aspire to get to $200 million. I'm looking for that sort of board." Let anyone and everyone know we tend to want to tell people that are in influential roles or affluent situations, and you never know who knows someone that is looking for their next board member. Let anyone and
Absolutely.
everyone know. So start doing that. Stop thinking you have to get one more degree. I have to get one more position before I start my boardroom journey. Start your boardroom journey now. So stop being your own worst naysayer. Okay. And so that's what I would stop doing. And then continue to believe in yourself and truly understand what value you bring, the joy you bring to those around you, and continue to aspire to do more of that, but maybe in a different setting around that
Yeah.
corporate board.
Dr. Keith Dorsey, you are such a gift. This has been so incredible. And I love your passion around this topic. I love that you are an ally for women and people of color in this space because there's so much need. And you're just giving away so beautifully all of these tips and tricks and wisdom from your research. And I feel like there was a bigger calling that led you down the trail of this research and had you pivot in your doctoral program, and we're all the recipients of that gift. So thank you for being on the show and for sharing all of your wisdom with us today.
Thank you, Cynthia. This was fun. I definitely enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, if for the women listening, if you've established credibility, if you've reclaimed your voice, if you feel called to a larger arena where decisions will shape futures, that isn't restlessness, that's readiness. So take Dr. Dorsey's advice, pick up a copy of his book, and start working on your future today. Until next time, you've got this. Congratulations on choosing to invest in yourself. I know your time is precious. Thank you for spending it here with me. I believe in helping you look up, step forward, and fully realizing your potential. If today's conversation resonated, I'd be so grateful if you'd rate and comment on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you know someone who would benefit, please share this episode with them. Let's stay connected. Visit me at dr-cynthia.com, and you can find me on all the socials at Dr. Cynthia Bentzen-Mercer. Until next time, remember, boldly start working on your future today.